Clothing is a key component in character design, and by far one of the most important. With it, we can instantly tell a lot of things about the character. It's a good indicator, reflecting upon the environment the person is most commonly in. This stick figure is wearing a rather heavy set of medical personal protective equipment, so we could tell that this guy must work at a hospital at a time where there is some sort of disease-related event that would call for such protection. Clothing further connects the OC to their respective setting, and can be a method to tell their personality, status, preferences among many other things. Given the importance of clothing, how could you possibly create good clothing in Sticknodes? Further improving your work and detailing, not just recoloring the skin. Greetings, I'm Rupert Animations with a Sticknodes tutorial, and our agenda for today is clothing. I will be explaining how clothing works, how to make clothing, how to rig it for easier editing in the future, and adding details into these outfits that will no doubt help you in your character creation. That is if your character has clothing. But before we get into it, just a word of advice: everyone has their own style in Sticknodes. Some of the detailing methods that may be shown here may not be applicable to certain art styles. Rest assured, this video will cover the basics on clothing, helpful tips that will remain useful in your Sticknodes and even art journey. So, without further ado, we'll get to the juicy and game-changing parts in a bit, but first, you must first understand how clothes work and what they tend to do. Without this, literally most of the tips here would not work properly. First of all, clothing, or fabrics in general, tend to always droop as seen here. These fabrics, subjected by gravity, tend to rest and follow the structure or shape that's supporting it. Because of this, it's best to account for the body that would be under the clothes. This will allow you to create clothing fit for your character and make folds that form in the right places. There are different clothing folds that do appear depending on the forces applied to the fabric, such as pipe folds, which, as the name suggests, look like pipes, and usually appear when clothes hang in one point. We can actually see this in things like skirts on dresses. Along with pipe folds, we also have drop or flying folds, which also occur when fabric is hanging in one point. If there are two or more points where the cloth hangs, the result would be diaper folds.
Okay, cool, but what about limbs? A stick figure is wearing a long-sleeved polo. What are the folds that would be appropriate in this scenario?
That would be compression folds. As always, account for the forces the cloth or fabric is experiencing. So in this scenario, you might get zigzag or spiral folds, maybe even half-locked folds. And since we can't really change folds during the animation process, it's best to apply these folds regardless whether limbs are bending. Another thing that you might want to consider is the types of fabrics your OC's clothes are made out of. Different fabrics act differently. Thinner clothes tend to have a lot more folds, while thicker clothing like jackets have less folds. I personally encourage using photos to get a sense of how to create these in Sticknodes, and how they would act. With the basics covered, let's move on to actually making clothes in Sticknodes, shall we? For the sake of conveniency in the creation process, future edits and node count optimization, it's always a good practice to have a sorted topology when adding clothes or in general, Sticknodes asset creation. For example, we have a segment that represents the arm. The first layer and branch is the clothes. Then there's a separate branch layered above for the details, and depending on you, each type of detail might have their own separate branches, like stains and scratches may have a different branch from the clothing sewing seams and such. This allows for your work to be a lot more sorted and easier to work with. It is optional, but I recommend turning on smart stretches, especially because it might be a big help in animating. Depending on the type of outfit, you may want your clothing to be movable. In this case, instead of attaching the clothing branch to the parent node of the limb it's supposed to be covering, instead, attach it to the limb and position it to the parent node via an invisible segment, allowing the limb to be moved with the clothing branch and still be movable, instead of these two being independent and needing to be moved manually. Very convenient. As I have stated before, you should consider the type of fabric your OC is wearing. Along with this, the space between the outfit and skin. Clothing may use varying segment thickness depending on these conditions, allowing for a lot more depth to your OC. Another thing to consider is the shape of the clothing. This shirt is tucked into his pants, and we can see that there is this sort of trapezoid shape forming here. Using trapezoid segments, you could further simulate clothing folds and its relation to other pieces of the outfit, adding to the depth.
So, how do we actually do these clothing fold details?
Well, we have a variety of shapes to choose from. These shapes can be used differently for different types of folds. Trapezoids, usually with rounded ends, are best when working with half-lock folds and zigzag folds. In this case, I advise using a darker, horizontal gradient on the segment, usually facing downwards, as most light sources are above the character, simulating shadows. Trapezoids can even be useful when doing pipe folds, using gradients to your advantage. Other than the trapezoids, you could also use ellipses. In some styles, clothing may be preferred to be kept simple with the same purpose. Make the inner radial gradient darker and you've got some pretty decent fold effects usually used when you want folds going inwards. You could also use half ellipses for making skirts on dresses or in any flying folds. You could also use them in combination with trapezoids.
But what if your style involves a lot of flat colors and not a lot of gradients?
Well, you could use polyfill, usually in a darker color of the base clothes. It's very versatile, especially because it can be changed in any shape. This is optional, but me personally, I like adding smaller details into my stick figures outfits, sewing seams and sewing lines and such. It gives a lot more personality, and overall, these small things, though not really that noticeable, can have a very big impact for your creation. Just one thing that you might want to consider. How about wear and tear? Say you have an OC who frequently gets himself to strenuous situations where his or her clothes might be subjected to a lot of scratches and abrasions. Well, I recommend using very thin ellipses for this, usually in parallel with slight directional deviations. The gradients are usually radial with the darker part inwards. Usually there is a bigger ellipse under the scratches that may have a differing color, maybe a little bit lighter. This little touch can help with blending the scratches to the base clothes and making them fit each other. With bloodstains, or, well, any stains in general, remember that fabrics are known to be absorbent. Most substances don't just rest on top of clothing. So, what you want to do is get an ellipse, a wide one, with the same color as the clothes, with the inward gradient of the ellipse being the color of the stain. I advise on adjusting the gradient color a little. Since the substance is absorbed by the fabric, the color would change, yes, but you would still see the color of the clothes through the stain. So instead of the pure color of the stain, I prefer on using some color in between the stain color and clothing color, finding a good balance, although due accounts for the quantity and nature of the substance. Now, the last and definitely one of the most important pieces of advice I could give is using references. Anticlimactic, I know, but there's a reason for it. Having something that you could loosely base your work around can give a sense of direction, and provide understanding of the clothes or outfits you're working with. As an example, I used this Voice and PPE poster that I kept seeing on my way to school and, running out of ideas at the time, just decided to use it as a reference to create my TWS construction worker stick figure. It turned out great. Without it, I'm sure it would have been drastically worse, by a long shot. And that concludes our video. As always, I hope that this at least helped you with whatever project you may be doing. Wait, before you click off, I would like you to ask you to click the like button on this video, and if possible, subscribe, as it really is a big help in achieving my channel goals.